Hello and welcome to another standard video here on the official MTG Arena channel. Today we finally get to play with Tarkir Dragonstorm on the ranked ladder, and one of the new cards I wanted to try out is the Rot-Curse Rakshasa in this Dimir Demons deck, and Demons was already an established archetype before Tarkir Dragonstorm, but now we get to add this 2-mana 5/5 Trampling Demon into the mix, but there is a drawback. It has Decay, meaning it cannot block, and when it attacks we have to sacrifice it at end of combat. So it's a one-time use, but even out of the graveyard it still has a use case through the renew mechanic. We can pay X double black, exile it from our graveyard, and put a decayed counter on each of X target creatures. So that's an excellent way to push through damage, especially in the late game. If there's a bit of a board stall happening, we can just give all opposing creatures decayed counters, they cannot block, and we can get those last couple points of damage across. So the Rakshasa is pretty decent in and of itself, but it also has excellent synergy throughout, especially if we can curve a Rakshasa into an Unholy Annex. We simply don't attack with the Rakshasa, and then end of turn not only do we draw a card with Annex, but we now also get to drain the opponent for 2, gaining 2 life in the process. And then later we can also unlock the Ritual Chamber, making a 6/6 Flying Demon token, which can also ensure that the Annex keeps draining the opponent, as opposed to losing us 2 life each turn. And then the Rakshasa also synergizes very nicely with Kaito, Bane of Nightmares, as a turn 2 Rakshasa can attack on turn 3. Our opponent's unlikely to be able to block our 5/5 Trampler profitably, and then after dealing 5 damage, while we're in the end of combat step, we can still ninjutsu in Kaito, since the Rakshasa is technically still considered an attacker, and even though the Decayed trigger went on the stack, it didn't quite get sacrificed yet, so now instead we put in Kaito, and we got to deal 5 damage as opposed to 3, so that's an upgrade. And then the Rakshasa goes back into our hand, where we can once again redeploy it to hopefully deal 5 more damage. And then now we control Kaito, which can plus to give our ninjas +1/+1, pumping himself, or we can use a 0 to surveil and draw cards, or the -2 can tap opposing creatures down while putting stun counters on them, so that's also a form of removal, and there's even additional synergy with those stun counters, as we'll see in a second. And then topping off our curve, we also have the Bloodletter of Aklazot, a 2/4 Flying Demon, saying if our opponent would lose life in our turn, they lose twice that much life instead. It's also very synergistic with the Unholy Annex, as our opponent would lose 4 life end of turn, which can happen right away. And the Bloodletter also sets up a 2-card combo with the Unstoppable Slasher, a 2/3 Death Touch that's very hard to get rid of, and once it hits the opponent, we get to halve the opponent's life total. So if we have their life total while doubling it with Bloodletter, we just win the game on the spot, so that's another very neat interaction. And the Bloodletter is also very good with the Rakshasa as a 5/5 Trampler. If it gets to connect, we potentially make the opponent lose 10 life instead. And then to round things out, we've got some evasive creatures, which are also good at setting up the ninjutsu on Kaito. The Spyglass Siren, making a map token, can help us explore to hit our land drops as well. And then a Mockingbird we can cast for X = 0, copying a Spyglass Siren, making another map token, but we can also cast it maybe copying our Rakshasa, making a flying version of it, and then once we assemble a couple of these 5/5 Tramplers, we can cast our Bloodletter and then attack and deal a ton of damage out of nowhere. And then the Floodpit's Drowner, another creature we can maybe copy with a Mockingbird, can tap opposing creatures down, putting stun counters on them, and then we can also use that to maybe set up Kaito. Picking up the Drowner to replay it is also a pretty nice sequence, so there's a ton of synergy there too. And then to round things out, a bit of spot removal here with Cut Down, can't really get any cheaper than that, and then a Go for the Throat, another efficient removal spell at 2 mana. And then the mana base also offers a bit of utility here with a Restless Reef turning into a 4/4 creature, and we can sometimes mill ourselves now, as milling a Rakshasa can also provide value out of the graveyard, so that's another nice little upgrade. And then plenty of blue-black dual lands, since we do need triple black for the Bloodletter, so we can't afford to play too many islands. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play with a functional hand. Drowner's good at clearing a path for Slasher, so that can deal a lot of damage. And we've got plenty of interaction for aggro especially. So let's see what we're up against. A red aggro, so that's the matchup for Drowner and Cutdown. Slasher's also pretty annoying for them to answer, but they are playing a white version, so they will have Sheltered by Ghosts as well. So Manifold Mouse, I think I would rather Cut Down. Although cut down could be a better solution to a Sheltered by Ghosts. Because yeah, the Manifold Mouse would still trigger to give creatures double strike even if it's locked down. Yeah, I guess Drowner's also just more mana efficient. Alright, Rakshasa could be fun. Although Slasher seems better for now. Hit you for 2. And then they might have to halve their life total next turn. If they play Sheltered by Ghosts now, then Cut Down is potentially still a solution. Unless they also have a protection spell. It's going to be a Heartfire Hero, so that does pick up a counter now. And a Sheltered by Ghosts. Alright, so that is a 3-2, so it's still within range of Cut Down, luckily. But does mean we won't get to attack with a Slasher. But yeah, I definitely have to do this now before they get a chance to untap. So, I'm glad we sequenced it this way, otherwise, without Cut Down, we could have been in trouble. Opponent also gained life with the life-linking hero on the way out. Now Challenger. Goes for double strike. We'll see if they attack into the Slasher, so this implies that they have a way of triggering prowess. So I don't necessarily want to just block with Slasher right now. And it's a Monstrous Rage, so that is a big chunk of damage. Down to 5. But yeah, we'll see if our opponent wants to have their life total. In the meantime, we can play Rakshasa, and then Drowner can help us interact even more. And then we also can't forget about our creature land. Opponent takes it, so they are trying to set up lethal here. Might have to be afraid of a Shard Mage's Rescue, which could be a reason to just Drowner the Challenger now, so they can protect it. Do we think they have a Rescue? Maybe if they had a Rescue, they would have waited to cast it alongside Sheltered by Ghosts, or they would have sheltered the Manifold Mouse with Rescue backup. So I don't necessarily think they have it, but of course they could always top deck it. So our opponent's gonna move to attackers, trigger Mouse, we'll wait for them to target the Challenger, see what they reveal of Valiant, and then probably go for a Drowner. Alright, they're also going to use the Village. I guess since they're already kind of committed here, I could Drowner now in case they reveal a Rescue. But then again, if they have another Monstrous Rage giving Manifold double strike, I could still die. So I think we let that resolve. They found a Feather of Flight. That's okay. So we'll see if they tap out or keep up some mana. But there's a good chance Drowner can close it out for us. So Manifold Mouse trigger targets itself. Alright. Well, still gonna tap down the Challenger since I want tramples. But a Monstrous Rage would still be pretty bad for me. But Monstrous Rage on Challenger also would have been game over, so don't think we could beat that card. Alright, no attacks. So now with one blocker, I don't really see them surviving, especially if we send in the Reef. And then with Reef, it's also a good idea to mill ourselves in case we mill Rakshasa, so we can renew it out of the graveyard. And our opponent explodes. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Hand is serviceable. Not exciting, but we can potentially go exploring with Siren and Mockingbird copying Siren to hit our land drops for Bloodletter. And then we've got a good setup for Kaito with all these flyers. Alright, tactics, we'll have a look. So our opponent's black-white, maybe some sort of Catramos exile deck. For now, I think we explore. And Annex I'm happy to keep. Mockingbird, copy Siren. And hit you for 2. So we're on the board, we're about to draw more cards. Got removal. So can't complain. Attack for 3. Opponent does have a Ride's End, so kind of confirms our suspicion of an exile-based control deck. So they might have enchantment removal here, but I still gotta try. Rakshasa is a good pickup. Alright, Shores does enter tapped at the moment. But yeah, hit for 1, maybe we can afford to explore. Still gonna play my tapped land. And then Rakshasa means we now get to drain with the Annex. If they remove it, next turn we can make another demon. And that's a lot of damage coming their way. And yeah, there's Catramos. So currently not online. Do have to watch out for additional sweepers potentially. But yeah, could be worth it to get in with the Rakshasa already. Could also copy it with Mockingbird before we commit to an attack. And then Drowner end of turn. Kind of like that idea as well. So then I can play another tapped land. Don't think we want to copy Catramos, but that's also an option. So hit for 6. And then we've got plenty of ways to prevent opposing creatures from blocking. Annex is still draining them. And Catramos also costs life to draw cards with. They wouldn't be able to gain life with the Fortress between Cut Down, Go for the Throat, and Drowner. It's gonna be a Coffin, I see. You gain protection from everything until your next turn. So then I wouldn't be able to target my opponent or damage them, but I guess loss of life still works. So yeah, pretty interesting here. I guess we'll let that resolve. Opponent exiles the Coffin. I don't think I want to flash in the Drowner necessarily. Alright, so in that case, do I bother unlocking the chamber if there might be a sweeper? I think we just hang on to the Drowner. No point in attacking. And yeah, we still cause loss of life, which gets around protection. So our opponent's at 3. The Drowner can deal 2, so then if they draw one more card with Catramos, they could die. And they did have the Sunfall. That was to be expected. Still gonna play the Drowner here. And then 2 damage is game, but we also could have gotten there by making a demon and then draining again with Annex. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand has cheap removal. No way to really enable Kaito is the main issue. And also maybe lacking a third land. So this one's borderline. Yeah, I could see mulliganing this since it's a little clunky if we don't hit our land drop. Yeah, I'll mulligan. Alright, this I'll try. One Kaito can go, and then Mockingbird can fly over for Kaito. Siren is not really needed, but it is maybe an improvement over Mockingbird. since it can also help find land 3, and then Mockingbird can be used elsewhere. And then I'll explore while the coast is clear. Don't need another one. Yeah, land would have been better, especially because we're kind of wasting the +1 counter if we do end up picking it up. But I guess Mockingbird can also copy the Siren now. Bonus blue-white and Archaeologist, so this is Omniscience combo. Do not have any counter spells. At least I didn't mill Omniscience yet. So our best hope in this matchup is just presenting lethal quickly, maybe cut down on the Awakening. 1/1 Omniscience can save us, but that's not a guarantee. So I think Mockingbird still goes for Siren as opposed to Archaeologist. And then I may as well explore on the Siren that can attack. Alright, that land is good. So next turn we can put in Kaito, but yeah, we'll see if it's fast enough. Rakshasa with Bloodletter can also represent a lot of damage. Alright, so our opponent passes with 2 mana up. Annex the draw. Yeah, I think this is a Kaito turn since we want to try and hit our land drop. So Ninjutsu, pick up the Mockingbird Siren. They could still have an Ephara's Dispersal for the other Siren, but Kaito has hexproof. And is now unblocked, so Archaeologist cannot get in the way. Opponent did have the Dispersal. So I guess they're less likely to put Omniscience in the graveyard now. And then Kaito wants to draw. And Darkslick Shores enters tapped. Swamp lets me cut down, but that's not super relevant. So I guess I'll keep both and then play the Shores now. If they already had Omniscience in graveyard, then keeping up cut down could be relevant, because we can answer the 1/1 Spirits, and if they don't immediately cast another Omniscience or have a counter spell, we can potentially prevent them from comboing off. So Chart a Course, discarding Omniscience, so yeah, if they have Awakening in hand, next turn they could go for it. And Kaito is sent packing, and Soul Partition's particularly painful because it's not like we can ninjutsu it from exile. So that's not ideal. This turn, I guess I could go for Rakshasa, copy it with Mockingbird, keep up cut down, so we maybe have a piece of interaction. And then Bloodletter next turn with double Rakshasa can present lethal. Our opponent will know that we're keeping up interaction since we're not tapping out for Spyglass Siren, but so be it. So do we see them hovering over the graveyard? Not yet. Can still cut down a 2/2 Spirit. Alright, opponent's going for it anyway. So, as soon as I get the chance, I want to cut down. Opponent casts Archaeologist, so we'll see if they have more instants in hand. Moment of Truth, digging for maybe a counter spell. And they found it, refute. So if they have the battle in hand, we lose the game here. They found a Dispersal, which could also maybe keep them alive. Bouncing Archaeologists, so they are looking for the invasion. But now if they fail to find it, we might present lethal. Alright, they found it, so that's game over now with Omniscience. Cast Invasion. Grab any number of sideboard cards that can keep picking up the invasion over and over. This town ain't big enough is one of them. Opponent had another invasion in hand, apparently. And Breach the Multiverse is going to be their weapon of choice to mill us out, maybe. This town ain't big enough, pick up the battle ×2. One of them returns town ain't big enough, the other returns Breach. Jace can also mill us to death. So yeah, it doesn't take long here to close it out, so we'll let them do it. But once you've seen this deck with Omniscience and Invasion a few times, you can always save time and just scoop it up. But for the purpose of this video, we'll let them have their fun. So yeah, it was a close one. If they didn't draw into the refute, we can maybe prevent them from comboing off this turn, and then Bloodletter with 2 trampling Rakshasas can potentially present 15 damage. So we're down to 13 cards. And there's nothing I can do in my upkeep that would affect the outcome here. Not like we're playing a burn deck that can deal 15 damage in our upkeep. Alright, so we're dead. Opponent's also down to 19 cards. Alright, not sure what they're still doing. They can just pass priority. They've got a Peerless Recycling. Okay. Anything else? Alright, opponent's picking up Omniscience and Jace, and now passes the turn. And there we have it, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a nice hand. Drowner, a good way to set up Kaito. We've got Cut Down on 1. Annex for more card draw. And against a Goblins, yeah, I think I'm okay cutting down since I'm quite likely to want to Drowner on 2. Although, never mind, now Rakshasa can hopefully showcase the ninjutsu synergy. Hit you for 5, still put in Kaito. Although just casting an Annex would also be decent here. Alright, I think we go for it, so gotta play my land. I'm going in full control, just to make sure I don't mess this up, because the timing is quite particular. So first we let damage happen, but while we're still in the post-combat damage step, we can ninjutsu, which is a pretty small window. But it does work, and then now the Rakshasa is not sacrificed to Decay. And then second main we can draw. And wow, our opponent concedes. They were mind blown by that interaction that they couldn't take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. This hand's a little awkward without blue mana. Still need a third land in general. I think we can do better. This is a bit better. And then probably keep Siren over Mockingbird, since we could use the Explorer into a land, and then Cut Down is maybe a bit better. But Drowner is still excellent for enabling Kaito. Alright, so red-white could be kind of a controlling tokens deck with a new United Battlefront. In which case, I'm not sure if they have instant speed removal. Looks like they do. Maybe a Torture Tower. So then I don't really want to explore now. Although if they use Torch now, I guess they won't have it later. What else could they be holding? Maybe a Get Lost? Yeah, it's tough because we do really need to hit our land drops, but feels like we would just waste our map if we go for it now. Alright, they tap out for a talent, so now the coast is clear to explore. Since we didn't draw the land for Kaito. So then I guess, do we explore first or do we surveil first? Could also just go tap land, end of turn Drowner, so we have more ways of setting up Kaito. Keeping up cut down is kind of decent too, so we can maybe stop them from copying a token with a talent if that's their intention. But yeah, Kaito should be the priority since Planeswalkers are more difficult for them to interact with. So let me just see what's on top. A swamp. So now I think exploring is reasonable. Since I'll still have cut down available. We're guaranteed a land for next turn. Could still kind of pivot and Mockingbird the Siren as well, so we have 2 creatures that can enable Kaito, which I don't hate. Because they're not guaranteed to level up the talents, and they're most likely going to be tokens on the ground that we can ignore while we fly over. Alright, opponent's just activating Fountain Port to trigger talent and draw. So this is kind of the point where we need to watch out for Sunfall, exiling the board, but that's where Kaito is kind of the perfect follow-up. So go ahead and attack. A ninjutsu. And then I should probably pick up the Mockingbird, since that's a bit more versatile going forward. Kaito probably draws, although it could also start giving itself +1/+1. The only concern is a get lost destroying our Planeswalker, then I would feel bad about not drawing the card first. And then a backup Kaito I don't hate. Probably don't need the extra cut down. What we want to find here is an Unholy Annex, for instance. I will still Mockingbird, just to have more ways to enable Kaito for next turn. Alright, so we're making progress. Bloodletter can also represent a lot of damage, especially if Kaito manages to connect. And if they Sunfall here, it's not a disaster. Alright, Forge was also to be expected. Can be a good way of pressuring Kaito. And they had the Get Lost, so glad we have the backup. But now we may not have a lot of time to make use of Kaito before Forge will take it out. Although between Drowner and Cutdown we have a few interactive spells to combine with it. Rakshasa is also useful. So options aplenty, even activating Restless Reef. But yeah, it's got to be another Kaito, and then keep up Drowner to maybe tap down a Forge token, and take it from there. And then once again pick up the Mockingbird. Bone falls to 10. I will, I think, still surveil, since I would like to hit my land drop for next turn, but going for the +1 does make it harder for them to maybe burn Kaito out. And then we already have Bloodletter, a Reef enters tapped, so it's not quite as good. There's a Verge, and then we'll pass. Could have also opted for Mockingbird plus Cutdown, but I think Drowner's going to be a little bit better. Second Forge. And another Get Lost. Alright, was not necessarily expecting that one. So now we care less about tapping down the Forge tokens, and more so about maybe tapping down the fish. Alright, the fish is attacking. Wasn't expecting that. But fair enough. I guess we'll still put the stun counter there. So now what's the best I can do? If there's a non-land card on top, I could explore twice, still play Bloodletter. So then we would have 10 damage exactly. It is a bit of a risk, if there's no non-land on top. But maybe that's the play. Still have Restless Reef to maybe cross the finish line if it doesn't work out. So let's try it. Oof, land on top. that's not what we wanted. So now at most, if I do find another non-land, I could deal, let's see, 3, 4 times 2 is 8, put our opponent to 2. If I Bloodletter, it feels like Sunfall's incoming. At least Sunfall, I guess, means that they'll be mostly tapped out. So yeah, I guess we'll go exploring again. Alright, and keep Slasher on top. Play Bloodletter. Hit you for 8. And then we'll see what happens. If it's just Sunfall, level up Talent. We can deal with the Talent token, even if it's pretty large from the Forge here, since it's still within range of cut down. And then Restless Reef should do it. So we fall to 9. And a level up Talent seems to be the play. So copy the 3-1, dies to cut down, Restless Reef attacks for the win. Yeah, definitely a close one here. Opponent also taking a damage of Battlefield Forge. Maybe should have milled my opponent just to figure out if they're playing the Battlefront, but I would guess so. Sweet. So yeah, got to see this new build of blue-black demons in action. And yeah, the Rakshasa seems like a natural inclusion as a cheap demon for Annex, as well as a way to enable Kaito. We didn't quite get to renew the Rakshasa out of our graveyard to prevent opposing creatures from blocking by giving them Decayed, but that's another very useful mode if there's a bit of a board stall happening and we need to deal those last couple points of damage. So overall, this Dimir Demons deck can be built in a lot of different ways, but I've been liking the addition of the Rakshasa. So that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.